Thanks, Tiffany, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. It is great to be with you. This is Scott Wiley, President and CEO of the Ohio Society of CPAs, and today I am coming to you live from room 624, my hotel room in Pasadena, California. I like to tell people I'm really out here for another reason. I'm part of the, I'm looking for a hotel room for January 1st when the Ohio State Buckeyes are here for the college football playoffs. But in reality, I'm here this week with several Ohio leaders for the fall meeting of the AICPA Governing Council. So I share that through the context of a lot happening in the profession. We're going to talk about some of the big issues here today. And also I'm going to pray to the Wi-Fi gods to be with me and for this next hour. So I'll apologize in advance if I get any choppiness. Worst case scenario, I will stop sharing my screen, which probably for many of you is a best case scenario, and we'll go from there. But we've got a lot to cover on today's town hall, so I'm going to jump right in. Our program today is going to examine the importance of storytelling. This can be viewed in the context of telling accounting story and reframing it to attract the next generation of accounting professionals. It can also apply to telling our own organization story or even our own. How do we brand ourselves to advance our business and our careers? How do we clearly define what makes us unique and share our story in a way that truly resonates? Joining me today is Haley Boehning, the founder and CEO of Storyforge, a Columbus area communication consultancy. Haley will help demystify what it takes to tell our organization's story and to gain the internal clarity needed to ensure our message is on point, relevant, and authentic. Then we'll transition to a review of the new CPA exam that will be implemented in 2024 and what that means to the profession. We'll expose you to the Accounting Talent Action Plan that was unveiled at last week's Workforce Development Summit and ask for your insights. And finally, as we bring this town hall to a close, we'll do a roundup of the legislative developments affecting the profession. And as always, there's a lot to unpack today, so let's get started. And as we move along in the presentation, please share any questions you have in our Q&A box to make sure we spot them and answer. So I'm now pleased to introduce my guest, Haley Boehning. As I mentioned earlier, she's the founder and CEO of Storyforge. She's worked with a range of clients such as American Eagle Outfitters to nonprofit entities such as Pelotonia to professional service firms such as GBQ. Throughout her career in the corporate world, Haley saw firsthand the disparity in long-term results, engagement, and impact that occurs when leaders and their stakeholders are on different pages about things that truly matter. That's why she's passionate about helping leaders achieve the clarity and alignment necessary to get everyone and everything in the business on the same page so they can have the impact they want. Haley, thank you for joining us today.
Well, it's great to be here, Scott. Thank you.
And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for everyone so you can get a better sense of Haley on your screen. Certainly, hopefully you've made it so you can see us. But Haley, again, I want to thank you for being here. You know, we have spent some time over the last month really talking about the value of story in so many different ways. So I want to jump right in if I can.
Sure.
You've worked with hundreds of businesses and organizations to help them discover and tell more meaningful stories. Are there common characteristics you can point to that help distinguish a story that cuts through the clutter from one that falls flat?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are a couple things I can share. And first, I just will maybe share something I was reflecting on as I was listening to you speak, which is often I'm in rooms of business leaders just like this one, and we're all talking about storytelling and how can we do it and how can we do it better. And what's fascinating to me is that as humans, we're just natural storytellers. It's how we're wired. It's how we relate to the world. We're always looking for context and meaning and understanding. And yet when we bring our businesses into the conversation, sometimes we have to remind ourselves of some very, very fundamental things that somehow we seem to forget when we put on a suit and walk into an office. So the common characteristics of a really meaningful story for any kind of business or organization that's trying to communicate, there are really 5 characteristics. The first one is simplicity. And unfortunately, especially when we know our businesses better than anybody else, we can make our stories just too complex. We use language that's difficult for people to understand. We try to tell people everything about our business, and therefore we make it really difficult for our story to be memorable. So simplicity is the first thing. The second thing is often we focus on just the dry, technical, functional aspects of what we do. And we think that's what's going to get people to connect, when in fact, when we can find the emotionally compelling aspects of our story, the things that kind of connect to the human heart and not just the human head, that helps us cut through the clutter. The third thing is really relevance. And this sounds so foundational because it is, but making sure we understand who we're trying to tell our story to. Who are they and what do they care about? What do they need? What do they want? What do they believe? And how can we make sure that the story that we want to tell is actually aligned with the story that they want to hear? So relevance is that third thing. The fourth thing, it's very simple when we're telling our own story, but when we're in business, somehow it becomes very difficult for us to make sure that we're telling really authentic stories. So stories that are true to who we are, who our business is, that are authentic and that can come across as authentic to our audiences. And then the final thing, that fifth characteristic of meaningful stories, and I always mention this one last because it's really difficult, and that is to remember that stories are really only powerful when they're both told and lived. And unfortunately, we get that wrong a lot in business. We come up with these beautiful, wonderful, aspirational stories, but then we do not actually deliver on them. So really meaningful stories and really powerful brands are stories that are told and lived. So both of those things have to be together.
Haley, I think that's really important. Again, I want to just frame those up for our participants. Well, hopefully we're taking notes, but simplicity, finding the compelling to tell, to create that connective tissue, the relevance. We talk a lot about authenticity. And then, the critical part in CPAs, we need to hear this. Telling the story is one thing, living it is another. And certainly the profession is going through so many challenges right now as we navigate business transformation with our clients and the organizations we serve, but we're also looking at a pretty significant talent shortage, as are several industries and professions, as are most. And how we make sure we're living what we're telling is really important. I appreciate you framing that way.
Yeah,
go ahead, Haley.
No, I was just going to say, I think that is, it's a wonderful tension. So we want to tell stories that are aspirational, that connect with the human heart, that are something that we can aspire to, that speaks to that part of us. But we also need to make sure that we're making good on the story. So it's this tension between telling and living that story and wanting to push ourselves to be more aspirational.
Well, so for our participants, you should be seeing the attendance check poll on the screen. I'm going to keep moving on. Haley, CPAs have historically been far too humble in telling our story. And that's a generous framing. Would you tell us about how you and Storyforge became engaged with the CPA profession, and perhaps some misconceptions about the profession you were aware of or had yourself coming into this project?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the misconceptions that I had, I'm almost embarrassed to share them, but they were pretty much aligned with what I think the general perception of the profession is. And certainly, as I had the opportunity to sit in on numerous focus groups with Tiffany and your team over the summer, we heard this over and over again. But it was boring. It was traditional. It was staid. It was punching numbers, counting beans, all of those tired and worn statements that I know we've all heard. And certainly I thought of the profession, CPA profession, as something that was essential. Businesses needed it, but I didn't think about it as strategic. I didn't think about it as game changing, certainly. Sometimes I heard about it being unethical. But I absolutely did not have the perception that CPAs or the CPA profession was in any way changing the world. So I was very quickly dissuaded of these perceptions, thankfully, when I met GBQ and the team at GBQ. So They approached us back in 2017, 2018, as they had just gone through a massive rebranding and a really beautiful visual identity. And I think Darcy was with you probably a couple of months ago with this group to share that story. But what I heard, what I learned when I went out and spoke with their clients, and we spoke with their clients all over the region, what we heard was not any of those things. We heard about people in the profession using their CPA superpowers to change lives. It was remarkable. Really, really connecting authentically with how your profession can make a difference, can help businesses grow and change the lives of real humans.
Well, and you referenced the focus groups that you've been participating in. So let's take that a step further. Storyforge has been working with the Ohio Society and Ohio CPAs on developing some updated messaging for the profession. Will you tell our participants a little bit about the project and some of the most striking things you've learned during that process?
Yes, absolutely. And I imagine that some of the folks that are here in this town hall may have been in some of the focus groups that that your team was gracious enough to let me sit in and listen to. And we spent the summer just listening, absorbing, and reading all of the incredible research that your team and that others in the profession have been gathering as you're at this inflection point. And this recognition, this insight that you've had about story and messaging being just one of the components that needs to be addressed in order to take the profession into its next phase, in order to transform the profession for the future. So it was really, really fascinating. And what I heard, what I was listening for was both the story that is being told, either to ourselves or to the audiences that we're trying to reach, but also the story that's kind of in between the lines. What is in between the lines? What's in the background of the story that we're telling? And where are those opportunities? And quite simply, the opportunity is really a holistic one. There is a challenge and there is a need to reframe and change the story of how we talk about the profession. We also need to talk about and change how we tell that story. So we need a new story, but we need to rethink how we're telling it, where we're telling it, when we're telling it, who is telling that story, and how are we enabling them to tell that story differently. So everything from the vehicles to the stories to the storylines, especially in light, I think, Scott, of what you said earlier, which is we recognize we have a massive workforce challenge. We are not alone. We are not the only profession doing it. But we need to reach people, younger people, our Z generation, our millennial generation, in ways that they find meaningful and they find relevant. And we need to reach them with stories that are relevant. It reminded me of a young woman that I know who is in her early 20s and was finishing high school during the pandemic. And she said to her dad at the beginning of the pandemic, hey, do you know any good medical dramas? I just finished this interesting medical drama. She's an artist. She was in art school. And he said, oh, yeah, watch Grey's Anatomy. And she did. Every single episode of Grey's Anatomy. I think it's 400 or something episodes of every single Grey's Anatomy that ever came out. And over that 2-year period of watching these episodes and getting through the pandemic, she came out of high school and said, you know what? I'm not interested in being an artist anymore. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be an EMT. The stories that she heard about that profession completely changed her perception of what would be a meaningful and interesting career for her to consider. We need to tap into that.
Yeah. Well, and that came out earlier this month or late last month when we convened a coalition of business leaders, educators, and CPAs from all sectors of practice to discuss workforce development challenges in the CPA profession and start working together on those solutions. I can share that the audience was, quite frankly, thrilled hearing some of the initial concepts Storyforge has developed regarding telling our story. Are there some elements of that shaping story that you can share with the audience today?
Yeah, there are 4 major questions, essential questions that any business or organization really needs to address as it's crafting its story. And I think most of those questions are questions that we need to ask and answer for the profession. So the first one is very, very simple, but extremely hard to communicate and to articulate, which is, Why do you exist? Why do we have CPAs? What is the difference that we make being a part of a business, being a profession? What is that intersection, as Aristotle said, between our unique ability and a need in the world that we see? Where those two things come together is the answer to that question. What's your purpose? Why are you here? Why should anybody care? We need to do a better job of tapping into the why of our story. The other thing we can do a better job of is talk about who we serve. Who are we here to serve? Who are those people that benefit from the work that we do? Those people that need us, that we create value for every day. And how do we talk about that value? I think another thing we need to tap in is really, what do we stand for? As a profession, as a business, what do we stand for? What are those beliefs that we have about the work that we do and how we do that work in the world, that differentiate us from other professions? What is that's meaty and meaningful in that? And I think we also need to think a little bit more about what our vision is for the future. What are we all working toward? Why are we doing what we do as a profession, as businesses, as people? What is this future world that doesn't exist today that we know if we fulfill our purpose, we can help realize that future vision? And then how are we going to get there? There are a lot of questions about the how right now. There's a lot of change happening, a lot of technology. We had a huge conversations about AI. And how is that working in our profession? We need to tell more relevant, meaningful stories about how we are keeping up with, and our strategies are keeping up with the world around us.
One of the things you shared when you shared some of the initial sentiments that were hard to hear, people have heard for a long time. And if we're really honest, folks, this group is the worst about sharing them. Right? That pain and difficulty we often wear as a badge of honor, but it doesn't put the profession in the best light. But one of the things you said, you shared as you heard where that what and why and the work and the why come together in that vision, you said 4 words that I'll never forget. And you talked about the profession and CPAs, and you said that what you ended with was changing business for good. Yes. And I've thought a lot about the for good. And certainly we have just come out of the period of business is changing for good. But then we also know the real meaningful work that this profession is doing for good. And it's important that not only our participants today, but this profession really starts to think about their work and their why.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all of those questions combined, but the higher levels of emotional connection that we can make for people, the emotional benefits that can come through in your story, it's remarkable. And I heard stories of the CPA profession being the place where our entrepreneurs live. You speak the language of business and you help people use it. And you can help people use it for good. Your profession is full of CFOs and CEOs and entrepreneurs and business leaders and global management consultants. I heard stories about federal agents. You took down Al Capone, for God's sake. You're out there fighting the good fight, right? You are doing amazing things. And there are amazing people in your profession. And it is not the perception that we have of old, traditional, white, stuffy, locked in a basement with a spreadsheet sitting at a computer every day. You're solving real world problems. You're changing business, you're growing business, you're empowering growth in your clients. It's really been a remarkable unveiling of this for me. Over the last couple of years and just over the last few months, all of the raw material that you need to tell a really, really meaningful story is there. And it's there in 2 ways. It's in the stories that exist today that are just not being told. The kind of stories that would take an 18-year-old who wants to be an artist and say, wow, I can't wait to be a CPA. I want to go into that world. I want to solve problems. I want to travel the world. But then there's also elements of your story, and Scott, you and I have talked about this. We need to change. We need to flip the story, but we also have to change the reality so we can flip the story. So we need to amplify the good that exists right now while we change the things that need to be improved so that we can tell a more meaningful story in the future.
Hear, 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 hear. Well, Haley, I appreciate you spending some time with us this morning, this afternoon, back on the East Coast. But more importantly, I appreciate the partnership you have formed with our team and certainly your team at Storyforge to really focus on how CPAs are changing business for good. Haley, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
And if folks will bear with me, I'm going to pull my screen back up as we move on to some other portions of our program. Everyone should be seeing a poll. If my team is not seeing a poll, someone needs to let me know. For those who are on their phones and not doing the poll, we're asking what change will have the biggest impact on attracting more students to the profession. And the options are allowing candidates licensed with less than 150 hours, better PR efforts such as storytelling, higher starting salaries, or others. And we're allowing people to do multiple answers. With a pretty even split, A, B, and C all received roughly 40%, allowing candidates a license with less than 150, better PR efforts such as storytelling, and higher starting salaries. And then other received 4%. So appreciate folks sharing their feedback on our first poll question, and we will have some more as we move along. Now, we've been discussing the reframing that is necessary to tell our profession story in a way that resonates with the next generations of accounting talent. Now let's transition to a review of the broader plan for addressing the talent shortage that exists. Toward the end of last month, we met, I'm going to pause, the second attendance check is now on your screen. The second attendance check is up. As I was saying, towards the end of last month, we met with leaders in the business, nonprofit, education, and government sectors to begin building a coalition in our state to address the talent shortage. As a state-regulated profession, it's important that states themselves take the lead on these efforts. Before we unveiled the plan, we outlined the scope of the talent shortage. The analysis of our team brought the issue into sharp perspective, and it's truly eye-opening. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is data that's been provided by the Accountancy Board of Ohio in April of this year. All of you know the Accountancy Board is the state regulatory agency that licenses CPAs in our state. In addition to licensing CPAs, they also have a statutory duty to register firms and to enforce the rules and laws. Now, of the CPAs who are licensed in our state, nearly 45% are over 60 years old. And nearly 2/3 are 50 years old or older. More concerning, we have more CPAs licensed in Ohio today who are 70 years old than we do between the critical band of 30 to 40 years old. So this brings into stark contrast as we anticipate the coming cliff of boomers exiting the profession. And remember, the boomer population is the first population that really had the 401k. So unlike the silent generation before that, if you will, hung on, we are not anticipating a significant hanging on as a demographic population with the boomer class, also the largest by birth. And we know that there are other generations that follow are smaller by birth. If we narrow our focus and look at just active license holders in Ohio, nearly 50% are over the age of 50. Given the increasing wave of boomer retirements, decreasing college and university enrollments, and the declining number of students majoring in accounting, we have a perfect storm that is brewing in the accounting talent area, which is why significant action is needed, and it's needed now. And that is why we convened a workforce development summit last month. Over the course of the last 6 to 12 months, we have met with key stakeholders in business, education, nonprofit, and government sectors all across the state, as well as with students and young CPAs, to gather their input as we work to formulate this plan. This framework is the culmination of that work aimed at changing the trajectory of the profession's future. The 5-point plan lays out as follows. As we focus on collaboration, our goal is with this pillar to establish a well-resourced and highly connected industry sector partnership to manage Ohio's accounting workforce talent strategy. And OSCPA will be the leader of that effort. As we heard from Haley, as we think about messaging, we need to change the accounting story, how it's told, where it's told, and by whom, so we can shift perceptions of our profession, drive engagement from our most critical stakeholders, and begin to fill our talent pipeline. As it relates to curriculum, we want to attract more people to the profession by providing engaging educational experiences that accurately reflect the work of accounting professionals today. Simply stated, what we teach needs to align with not only what we do, but where the future of the profession and its work will be. As we think about work experience, we want to be intentional to increase attraction to and retention of people to the profession by providing meaningful work experiences and creating intentional work cultures. Anyone who has read the Wall Street Journal over the last 6 months, particularly on a Friday, has seen the steady barrage in that source, as well as several others, about the profession. It's disheartening. Often it's not accurate, but there are threads of truth. We have work to do. And the last pillar is related to pathways. And we're seeking to remove unnecessary and often intentional barriers to entry and increase opportunities for individuals to pursue accounting careers and CPA licensure. So this framework, which includes a detailed action plan for each pillar, offers the potential for scalability beyond Ohio's borders and can possibly serve as a national model for the profession. For our next big poll question, we'd like to get you to offer your take on the biggest misconceptions about the profession. Clifton, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. As I think about Ohio specifically, in the Q&A, Clifton wrote, we need to change the perception that being a CPA is so much more than public accounting, inclusive of public accounting. But as we look here in Ohio, given just how industrious our state is as an economy, more F-1000 businesses than all but 2 or 3 other states, a top 10 industry sector around financial services, insurance, manufacturing, healthcare, retail, to name a few. The heartland, the Silicon Heartland, the work we're doing with Intel and Honda, the startup economy that was created here. This is the home of the National Center for the Middle Market. As we look at all those opportunities in Ohio, we know that Ohio is home to business. So, Clifton, I could not agree more. Now, with the poll coming to a close, let's see here. The biggest misconception, C, CPA work is boring. A third weighing in on that. E, a quarter saying that we only do taxes. And then B was the third, CPAs have no life-work balance. Great points and good information. Thank you for sharing. Now, we've talked often about the new CPA exam, and it is coming in 2024. So I want to provide an update on that. The new CPA exam also aims to change the image of the profession and to test the skills that are more relevant to those needed to succeed as a CPA in today's economy. Though it's overshadowed by the growing talent shortage, the launch of the new CPA Evolution Aligned exam is just a few months away. The AICPA continually evaluates how to improve the assessment of content and skills in the exam while maintaining reliability, accuracy, and validity, as well as improving the overall candidate experience. The new exam focuses on assessing core skills in accounting, auditing, and tax, with technology underpinning each of those 3 areas. In addition, the candidate will select from one of 3 focus areas: tax compliance and planning, business analysis and reporting, or information systems and controls. The new exam is designed to reflect the reality of current practice. There are several other notable changes, including the following: assessing research and related critical thinking skills differently. So this exam will employ a new research task-based simulation to assess a candidate's ability to identify an issue, consider and analyze facts and multiple excerpts of the auth-lit provided in accompanying exhibits, and determining the appropriate response. It will also replace the Excel spreadsheet with a JavaScript-based spreadsheet. It will remove the written communication task or essay questions. And by removing the essay question, it frees up room in the exam for the assessment of increasingly relevant, important knowledge and skills. The current written communication task focuses solely on the candidate's writing ability without regard to content accuracy. An automated scoring that assesses writing ability and content accuracy has not advanced as expected. Now, Ohio is fortunate to have 3 unique pathways to licensure, giving our state CPA candidates multiple options to enter the profession. Each path requires passage of the new CPA exam. Path 1 on this path must earn a baccalaureate degree or higher with a total of 150 semester hours. Now, these hours must include 30 hours of accounting coursework and 24 hours of other business courses. Candidates need to have 1 year of professional experience and must pass the uniform CPA exam. Path 2 provides candidates who select this path must earn a baccalaureate degree. Now, most baccalaureate degrees in Ohio require approximately 122 to 126 semester credit hours. As in Path 1, those hours must include 30 hours of accounting and 24 hours of other business courses. This path, though, requires 4 years of professional experience. And these candidates must first pass the GMAT exam with a score of 670 before they're eligible to sit for the uniform CPA exam. And then Ohio has a third path. And that final path allows candidates to earn an associate degree, which in Ohio is capped around 65 to 66 semester hours to earn an associate degree, either at a 2-year degree granting institution or at a 4-year institution that does award associate degrees. As in Paths 1 and 2, the required hours must include 30 hours of accounting coursework and 24 other business courses. Like Path 2, this path requires 4 years of professional experience, passing the GMAT with a score of 670 or better, and passing the uniform CPA exam. We share these as many people are not aware that, in fact, under law, Ohio does have multiple pathways to licensure. It is factually accurate to say that the vast majority of candidates in Ohio, 98%, license under Path 1. Anecdotal reporting from the Accountancy Board is that over the last 4 years, less than 2% of Ohio's total licensee population licenses using the second or third path, and that these paths are widely unknown. As the talent environment continues to evolve, and we identify that we are losing students and candidates before they even become eligible, dropping out of accounting programs, we are evaluating the ability of Path 2 and Path 3 to be viable options as we consider, are there ways we can more intentionally move people into the profession and create further on-ramps? That is not without risk. It is not without significant discussion. I've had conversations as recently as this week with individuals from the regulatory community who are not supportive of our efforts to expand access and to remove barriers to entry, specifically indicating that any attempt to do that would make Ohio a not substantially equivalent state, and may lead for some boards of accountancy to determine that Ohio licensees do not have substantial equivalency and would need to go through an arduous process to license in another state. That's information that we are carefully evaluating as we look at these paths that today are not proposals, and that's important. These are, in fact, pathways to licensure that exist under law. Path 2 and 3, in fact, have actually existed longer than Path 1. And Path 2 and 3 were actually passed, we believe, in 1983, so 40 years ago, whereas Path 1 is about 23 years old, 2000. And Path 2 and 3 were actually put in place in Ohio at the urging and advocacy of faculty from community colleges and private four-year degree granting institutions who in 1983 were concerned, following Florida being the first state to adopt 150 in 1979, but were concerned that at that time, the Ohio State University would create a graduate program and swoop up all the CPA talent, because back then, the 150 pathway was intended to be a graduate program. Obviously, things unfolded differently. The purpose of sharing this information is the following. These are the pathways that exist in Ohio under law today. Fact. These pathways deserve evaluation. Fact. And the Ohio Society, as the advocate for the profession in our state, is going to evaluate those. We're going to be transparent. What we've heard from firm leaders, from educators, from those in government who are looking at workforce issues, what we hear from business leaders is Ohio should be bold and intentional about creating more on-ramps. We also will be intentional about assessing risk. Representing a profession that does that every day, I can say safely, we have great people who serve in our boardroom who do this for a living. And I am confident that as they assess this risk, they will do so thoughtfully and intentionally, but with great care. So stay tuned for more in that regard. And our question in the next poll is, were you aware that these three pathways to licensure existed in Ohio? So roughly 90%, okay, roughly 90%, 89%, but 9 in 10 and participants today were unaware that these three paths exist. That's consistent, probably a little bit better actually than what we're finding. We're finding that most Ohio CPAs don't know these paths exist. The third attendance check is now available for you to participate in. And so our intention is to make sure we're being communicative about those. I'll pause. There was a Q&A. Jeremy asked, do the age demographics of CPAs in Ohio that we see in Ohio match with other states are experiencing? Jeremy, I don't know is the honest, direct answer, but I'm gonna opine for a minute. I suspect they do within a standard deviation. Fair to say Ohio's in the Rust Belt, declining population. We just lost a member of a congressional seat in the most recent census. So, our population's shrinking. The South and the West is where, the population centers are growing. So it would not surprise me if for example, a talent hub like Nashville or Atlanta or Phoenix or LA, you pick another, Dallas, the population bands might be a little bit better in terms of longer periods of time in the profession, i.e. younger. But I can't believe that they are substantially different. So I suspect that within a standard deviation, and I'm not a stats guy by any means, those percentages will likely hold. I doubt that we're going to see, actually in Georgia, it's 20 percentage points different. I don't know that. We got the data from the accountancy board. We're going to share it in this form tomorrow, though several of the board members are on today's town hall. Welcome. We're glad you're here. And, it was when we used our team and our financial analysts to spin it out and make it look like a picture that I could understand, we saw how bad it looked. So sharing that through that lens. Let me see if there was another question in the Q&A I'll answer related to this. For option 1, does a candidate need to have the 1 year of experience before they sit for the exam? No, they do not. For paths 2 and 3, this is moving. Is there the same reciprocity with other states? Linda, the answer is it depends, and we don't really know. There are some states, a handful, literally a handful, that under their state statutes have something called automatic mobility. And at the core of that says, if you are licensed and in good standing in another jurisdiction and seek to come here for occasional entrant purposes, meaning going to live in Ohio and go and work and insert that state and come back home, just there to serve your client, you're good. It is not the same as reciprocity. It is not saying, hey, I'm going to move to that state. And if you move to a state or another jurisdiction to be licensed there, you need to be licensed under their laws. And as we have found, every board of accountancy, while similar, is not the same. My counterpart at the Board of Accountancy, John Patterson, shared in the September meeting of the board, which I thought was both funny and accurate. John is an attorney, and he said, substantial equivalency is lawyer speak for not equivalent. So I thought that was an interesting point, and I don't disagree. And then Clifton asked, Scott, I think this information needs to get to the high school so that counselors are properly informing students. Clifton, I agree. That's a good point to hear. I am going to come back into the Q&A, but I want to keep us moving. I want to be mindful of time. I always push you up right to the corner. So I'm going to transition, give you an update on some government relations work that's happening. Let's review some of the legislative issues that we're seeing since the last town hall, all issues that we're working on in advance on your behalf. First up, I discussed this in our last town hall together, but it's so impactful that I really want to make sure we shared it again. As we talk about the shortage of new CPAs and those who are currently working to become CPAs, we have to remember the thousands of candidates who had successfully passed one or more of the 4 CPA exam parts, but then lost that credit during the pandemic because they hadn't passed all 4 parts within the rolling 18-month window. Wow, that was a mouthful to just say. This was especially harsh for those who were negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and related challenges. The Ohio Accountancy Board just voted to help all Ohio exam candidates who were impacted in this way by restoring their credit for any parts that expired between January 20th of 2020 and May 11th of 2023. And that's, if you're following at home, that's I'll call it the federal government window of pandemic, right? So that's the logic of that, January 2020 through May 11, 2023. This restored their credit, this restored credit will be good through June 30th of 2025. I really want to acknowledge the leadership of the Ohio Board of Accountancy in being one of the very first states to do that work. One of the board members, Jerry Weinstein, several of you know Jerry from, if you're a John Carroll graduate specifically, he may have been your professor, but Jerry chairs a national committee that really worked at authoring and articulating how they could do this on a national basis. Boards of accountancy all across the country are exploring this and are voting on this. Many have done so. Sadly, some are not going to do so. And that's just an example of where, if you've seen one state regulator, you've seen one state regulator. Looking nationally, another issue currently pending is a possible increase in white-collar workers who must receive time and a half overtime pay. The USDOL Wage and Hour Division is looking to increase the current overtime payments again for what is commonly referred to as white-collar overtime exceptions. As you can see, currently, certain workers who make at least $35,600 a year can be salaried. Under the pending proposal, that cutoff amount increases by almost $20,000 to $55,000 a year. If approved, small businesses in particular, including a number of nonprofit organizations, would see significant payroll cost increases. Impacted employees, particularly young professionals who are eager to network and engage in events that often fall outside the normal workday, could lose those opportunities due to the increased payroll impact of overtime pay. In 2019, the wage minimum increased from $455 a week to the current $684 a week. Should the pending rule be adopted, in 4 years, the salary requirement will have increased by 130%. The Ohio Society has been engaged on this issue as part of a national coalition we helped form, the Partnership to Protect Workplace Opportunity. If this issue impacts you, consider weighing in with the Department of Labor. The 60-day public comment period began September the 8th, which is a short period for organizations to gather relevant data and respond accordingly. We have joined with other state and national employer organizations urging an additional 60 days be provided for comment. Just wanted to make sure I highlighted. Certainly that impacts several of you who are the trusted advisor to Ohio's small business community. Prior to 2017, Ohio had 9 income tax brackets. House Bill 33 phases in a 2-year income tax reduction, taking Ohio from 4 brackets to just 2 in 2024. The top rate drops to 3.75 for 2023 and 3.5 for 2024 and thereafter. Ohioans making $26,050 or less would pay no income tax. The new employer withholding tables are effective November the 1st of 2023. The Ohio Society has also successfully advocated for a resident tax credit that modifies the treatment of income subject to other states' pass-through tax entities. The budget bill also enacted the first major changes to the CAT exemption amount since its inception in 2005. The annual minimum tax and annual filing requirement were also eliminated. After the 2-year phase-in by 2025, nearly 90% of all Ohio-based businesses will no longer pay the CAT. Since a large majority of taxpayers will not owe any CAT, the Department of Taxation is recommending that most taxpayers take action to cancel their accounts. Otherwise, those having more than the current exemption amount, $150,000 of gross receipts, will need to file quarterly $0 tax returns. A link to more information on the CAT change will be posted in the chat today. Several changes to Ohio's municipal income tax were amended in the state's budget bill. The first change applies to taxpayers who have a filing extension and limits this limited late filing notices and penalties that can be sent and charged by cities. The second impacts the net profits tax and allows businesses with remote and hybrid employees or owners to use a modified apportionment formula, along with another OSCPA priority that extends the due date for filing extended net profit tax returns from October 15th to November 15th. Of note, the pending Ohio Supreme Court decision regarding the 2020 municipal tax refunds has not yet been released. It should be out anytime now. The recently concluded sales tax holiday in August was the last one limited to school supplies, $20 or less, and clothing, $75 or less. The next one in August of 2024 will be longer in duration, likely up to 2 weeks, and applies to most items $500 or less. The only exclusions are motor vehicles, watercraft, alcohol, medical marijuana, and tobacco and vape products. Ohio's rainy day fund was maxed out at $3.5 billion, so the legislature increased the percentage of the GRF that can be contributed to it. This massive bill covers many other issues you may be interested in. Look in the chat for a link to a comprehensive budget bill document you can search. Pending ESG legislation was out of the Senate already, but no House votes happened yet. The Senate bill says that while public retirement systems, the BWC, and state universities can consider environmental, social, and governance factors, investment returns must be the main factor when making investment decisions. The House is expected to take up the legislation soon. The Ohio Fairness Act was reintroduced during the summer months and seeks civil rights inclusion for gender preference and sexual orientation. This broad focus will continue to make successful passage a challenge. OSCPA continues to prioritize efforts to increase the number of individuals seeking to become Ohio CPAs on a number of fronts. I already discussed a couple positive developments in this area, but stay tuned for more on workforce development. The marriage tax penalty repeal bill has always been a challenge because of the cost revenue loss to the state. Even if Ohio went to a flat tax, this issue will need to be addressed with legislation, since those Ohioans making under $26,050 pay no state income tax. And finally, House Bill 138 classifies guaranteed payments paid to pass-through entity investors, regardless of their ownership interests, as business income and therefore eligible for the bid. We see this as clarification, similar to House Bill 515 and business sales from the previous General Assembly, but others see it as an expansion of the bid. If you want more detailed information, see our legislative priorities update available in our website and also in the chat linked today. Before we close, I'd like to encourage all of you to consider registering for our upcoming accounting show. This is one of our biggest and most comprehensive learning events of the year. We're bringing some of the business world's best minds to this virtual stage where we're offering cutting-edge content and 41 sessions via 10 tracks over nearly 2 days. Nearly 100% of last year's accounting show attendees plan to attend again this year. Make sure you join them. Visit our website at ohiocpa.com/greatest show for more information and to register. And while you're at it, another popular upcoming event is our MegaTech Conference. Set for December 12th through 13th, the conference features a keynote address from influencer and EY principal Tony Nitti, along with many other leading subject matter experts. Brush up on all the latest tax topics just in time for tax season. For more information and to register, visit OhioCPA.com/mega23. And before I end, I want to thank Dell Technologies for sponsoring our Town Hall series. It's sponsors like Dell who enable us to bring you today's hottest topics featuring some of the best minds in business. Our last attendance check is on the screen and you should be seeing it. And with that, I want to say thank you for participating in today's Town Hall. I won't see you for a Town Hall in November. I hope to see you live at the Advance, but I will see you again in December 14th for a special year-end Town Hall I am very excited about. With that, I'm going to stop sharing, catch my breath, see if there's anything in the Q&A first. Oh boy. I'm going to do my best to read chat, but it says there's 100 messages, so likely not in the next 7 minutes, to be honest. Path 3, it's a tricky one, and I want to acknowledge that. And fall advance is virtual, yes, Jennifer. And I want to acknowledge this. And yeah, there's no easy answers. If there were, someone else would figure them out. But I've got to say it, folks. I'm not from here. I grew up in upstate New York. I lived in Indiana for 15 years, but my family has lived here for 10 and a half years. And I'd like to think that we've made Ohio home. There's just something about Ohio. There's something about you. There's something about the way we roll, right? That whole Ohio against the world mantra. The worst kept secret in this profession is that the profession itself believes the profession needs to change. Is there unanimity in what that change looks like and how it should be done? There is not. Is there a simple fix? There is not. It's complex. But there's near unanimity that the profession itself needs to change. Ohio is an agent of change. The Ohio Society represents people who change and transform business every day. We would be not true to who we are representing you if we weren't bold in our approach. Sometimes being bold means you don't get invited to the good dinners. That's okay. Because at the end of the day, we're focusing on something bigger. This is an incredible profession that's changing business for good. More people need to be a part of it. More people need to have access to it. More people need to know about it and be a part of it. We are absolutely committed to doing that, and we will be undeterred in our ability to get that done. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I'm going to hang out a little bit to make sure I didn't miss anything, but keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to keep telling your story. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of it. Tiffany, I'm going to turn it back over to the team. We'll go from there.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending the October Town Hall. If you've responded to the poll questions, so there were 4 of them, attendance checks, you needed to respond to at least 3 of the 4. We will do the CP processing on our end. There is nothing more that you need to do. So you do not need to go back to the Learning Center. You don't need to input anything. I know that's a different process and there's been some questions on that. So at this point in time, you are free to log off and everything now is more just our own processing.
folks who are hanging around that I'm reading some of the chat. I know I will not get to before people log off. I'll ask my team to make sure it's captured so we can respond. I want to make sure I see a question from, I thought it was from Charlotte, but it now moved because there's more coming in. The 3 paths are not one to replace the other. The 3 paths are unique, and all the candidate needs to determine what's the right one for them. But the 150 pathway does not require a master's or graduate degree. Many candidates do determine that is the right thing for them. Often a master's of accountancy, some a master's of taxation, some an MBA, maybe with a focus because they've already got an accounting degree. Some are getting a different graduate degree because they got all their accounting hours already. So they might be going to and getting a master's in data analytics, a master's in you name it. Some are not doing a master's or a graduate program and they're getting those 30 hours. But no one is advocating doing away with Path 1. At least no one at the Ohio Society of CPAs, and nor would we support that effort. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.